What in the world is an existential kink? We're going to talk about that today, but first I want to say thank you guys so much for nearly 600 YouTube subscribers. At the time of recording this video, I have 568, and I just want to say thank you because it means so much to me, and it has motivated me to create more and hopefully better content than what I've been putting out. And so if you're already a subscriber watching this video, welcome back. If you're new here, then go ahead and hit that subscribe button, because I have a goal for 2021, and my goal for 2021 is to read a book a week. And I figured if I'm reading a book a week, then I might as well make YouTube videos about the books that I'm reading, right? And so the first book that I've read in 2021 is this book called Existential Kink. And so what in the world is existential kink? And really it's just as weird and sexual as it sounds with the word kink, because the author uses this sort of kinky BDSM language all throughout the book, and it's pretty funny. It's a very fun read, and I really enjoy the way that it's written. But what the author is calling existential kink is very similar to Carl Jung's psychology of the shadow. And the shadow is this deep part of our unconscious mind that is driving us forward, and we don't even know that it's there. And it's these secret desires, and these secret desires oftentimes unknowingly make us feel very guilty and very self-conscious, and so we suppress these desires even more, which then just makes them control our life even worse. So to give an example to make this a little more clear, is the author says, all right, let's take this guy named Alex, okay? And let's say Alex, he's in his 20s, but he has this secret unconscious desire to be taken care of. And Alex has no idea that this desire is there. And even if you were to tell him that this desire was there, he'd be like, nah, what are you talking about? I don't think that, right? That's not something I think, because it's unconscious, right? And that desire to be taken care of was probably left over from a childhood of him not being taken care of. And so it's just that was never fulfilled, right? And so that's just a desire that has continued on throughout his life. Well, Alex is now in his 20s. And what does society say about 20-year-olds? Well, you're supposed to be independent at this point. You're supposed to go get a job, and you're supposed to go live on your own in an apartment. And so that's what he does. And he gets a pretty good job and all of this, but still that unconscious desire to be taken care of is leading him towards a life where he's being taken care of. And so the author says, well, let's just say through some unconscious actions, things happen, and he ends up losing his job, which then makes him lose his apartment, which then makes him end up moving back home. And when he moves back home, boom, he's fulfilling this desire to be taken care of again, right? But the issue is he feels very, very guilty and shameful about having to move back in with his parents and be taken care of, right? Because society says you're supposed to be independent and all of this. So what happens, right? This unconscious desire leads Alex to a place that his conscious mind doesn't want to go, which then leads to guilt and shame. And so the entire point of this book is to take those unconscious desires, such that Alex has, pull them forward from your unconscious mind to your conscious mind, and fully experience those emotions and fully enjoy, for Alex, being taken care of. Fully enjoy it and love it and stop feeling guilty about it. Because what does that do? Well, it takes that desire and it fulfills it. And then when you fulfill a desire, you can throw it away and you can finally move on from it. And Alex can stop being driven by his unconscious mind to places that he doesn't want to go. A Carl Jung quote that's repeated throughout the book by the author is, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The author even shares her own life story for a bit. So she grew up in a very abusive household, and there was a lot of addiction and poverty, and so this just led her to live this life as well. And so she was in this cycle of addiction and poverty and abusive relationships, and she ended up meeting this guy on Craigslist, and she's like, yes, Craigslist, I know it's just as bad as it sounds. And she said it was awful, that they would always scream at each other and fight, and then they would break up, and then they would call each other like as they're driving away from each other's houses and have these weird sexual phone calls. And she said it was just this cycle of these negative emotions that kept happening. But then she stopped one day and she realized, I actually really enjoy these things in some weird, freaky way, right? I enjoy poverty, I enjoy addiction, I enjoy the fighting and the thrill of this abusive relationship. And it was in that moment of realization that she was able to start the process of fulfilling those desires and then moving on from them. And so the author has a way to do this, and it's a meditative practice. But first she talks about these 7 axioms of existential kink that I want to read real quick. So the first one is, having is evidence of wanting. And I thought that this was very interesting. And I don't think that this applies to every situation. And I think the author would acknowledge that too, right? Because you think about having as evidence of wanting. You know, people have things like mental illness, but that doesn't mean that they want that, right? It's just something that's out of their control. What the author is saying is that there are probably a lot of things that you view as negative in your life that you have because some part of you, or some unconscious faculty, wants that thing. And that can be, maybe that's poverty, maybe that's an abusive relationship, maybe that's being overweight, maybe that's being lazy, maybe that's not wanting to find a better job. Just all these things that are typically viewed as bad and shameful, right? There's actually, the author says, there's actually some secret part of you that enjoys that and finds thrill in those things. And so having is evidence of wanting is a something you should ponder on, because I find it to be very, very interesting. It got me thinking about the things in my life. What do I have? You know, I for example, one thing I have is laziness. I'm lazy. I do the bare minimum all the time. And, you know, it's because I enjoy being lazy. It's something that's fun for me. And so this book has been very useful for not being ashamed of that and pulling that forward and enjoying that and fulfilling it. So axiom number 2 of this existential kink is, we have a choice on whether we experience sensations as pain or pleasure. And so she gives this example where, I guess she says that women can actually get to the point where they enjoy the pains of childbirth and they get off on it. And so that's her argument for that, you know, anything in life we choose. Like we can experience this as pain, or we can experience this as pleasure. And she uses existential kink because she talks about things like BDSM a lot, and people who are like masochistic and love to be whipped or degraded or things like that, right? And those are very sexual things, but those people in that moment of being whipped or degraded, they're choosing to enjoy that, right? They're using it for their arousal, and the author is saying you could do this with every scenario in life. Anything that comes at you, any pain that comes at you, you can choose to feel it as joy and get off on it, as the author would say. Axiom number 4, she says, our degree of being turned on or turned off is a matter of how much we're willing to approve in our life. And so this is kind of building off axiom 3, right? It's just more of, you choose to how you experience things, and if you approve of them or if you disapprove of them. if you disapprove of something, then you're going to be way more likely to be turned off by it. And if you approve of something, you're going to be way more likely to be turned on by it. And this can be something like approving of sad emotions. The example that the author gives, she says, you can feel sadness. And when you feel sadness, you can look at it and you can say, oh my gosh, my life sucks. I'm feeling so sad. Everything is terrible. Or you can look at this sadness and say, wow, isn't it beautiful that I get to feel this emotion? Like I cared about something enough that it made me feel sad that it's gone, right? And so it's changing the perspective of these situations, and it's finding pleasure and joy and beauty in the seemingly dark and bad unconscious things that often make us feel guilty and shameful, and we can find pleasure in those, right? So that's what the author's arguing throughout this whole book. Axiom number 5, this one is incredibly important, and I love this axiom. It's desire evolves through fulfillment, not denial and repression. Denial and repression and shame are awful teachers in every aspect, spiritually, everything, right? In every area. And so this is going back to what I talked about earlier of pulling those things forward, fulfilling the desire, moving on from it, right? In Axiom 6, it's pretty much the same thing that I just said. Shame is the magic killer. Shame is an awful teacher, and it's really never useful in any situation. So if you feel shame about something, anything, try to not use that as an emotion to teach yourself, because you're just going to get yourself stuck in the repetitive cycle of feeling shame, doing something, feeling shame, doing something, feeling shame. And it just is an unhealthy cycle that needs to be broken. And Axiom 7 is that the truth is sensational. And the author, she's like, I don't mean logical truth, right? Like 2 + 2 = 4, like whatever. But emotional truth is sensational. She says, when you go to tell someone you love them, it's true that you love them. And then you go to tell them that you love them, and you get, all sweaty and nervous and these excited emotions that you're feeling, and she says this is how it can feel when you're practicing this existential kink method and pulling these emotions forward, and you're fully facing the truth of them. It can be incredibly sensational and good and healthy. So what's the method for actually doing this? What's the method for pulling these things forward? And the author has a meditative practice that she gives kind of a step-by-step walkthrough of. And I want to give a little disclaimer that the author gives. And she says, if you have depression, you should not try this type of meditation, because it can just lead to very negative emotions and very unhealthy emotions. And it's just not good. There's other forms of meditation that are good for depression. I'm not sure what those are, but that's what the author said, so I'm taking her word for it. But this form of meditation essentially goes like this. She says you want to get yourself into a relaxed state, which is very common of all types of meditation. And then she recommends lighting a candle, or maybe some kind of incense, something that smells. And the reason that she suggests this is because you want to associate this smell with this deep state of thinking, because then what you can do is make it much easier for yourself to experience this deep state of thinking, right? You light the candle, you smell that, and your brain knows, hey, it's time to go deep into this meditation. It's time to calm the mind, and it's time to get serious, right? So then once you do that, she says to identify situations and feelings that you don't like. What are things that you experience that you feel guilty about or shameful about, or you just straight up don't enjoy? And she says identify the emotions with that. Why don't you like it? What are the things you feel? And then she says try to tap into the part of yourself that really enjoys those things, like like loves to do those things, and you might find this really difficult to do, but she has some phrases that you can say. I'm just gonna read a couple of them. So when you allow yourself to get in touch with this part of yourself, she says, say things like, I'm willing to allow myself to know about my secret weird pleasure of XYZ, or I'm totally allowed to have this weird enjoyment of XYZ. I don't need to regret it. I don't need to change it or deny it. And so these are just ways of identifying this, enjoying it. And sometimes she says this in a very humorous way, right? This is meant to be fun and light. And so she has one phrase in the book where she's like, no, I can't stand feeling wrong or bad, in like this sarcastic way. And so it's funny, right? It's supposed to be funny. It's supposed to be light. It's supposed to be feeling these emotions in a new way and in a new perspective, right? So the final step of this process is to get on the side of your shadow, fully enjoy, fully receive, fully be thankful for, fully get off on the pleasure of these unconscious desires that your unconscious mind thinks that it doesn't like, thinks that it doesn't want. Enjoy these things, integrate the shadow, and enjoy these weird, freaky desires that you have, and get off on every pain that life has to offer you. And the author has a couple more phrases for this part here that you can say out loud, and it says, the unconscious enjoyment matters just as much as any other enjoyment in my life. Or another phrase would be, my enjoyment of this messed up stuff is just as worthy as my enjoyment of sunshine and roses, right? So the good things and the bad things deserve just as much enjoyment and pleasure from them. And that is where my summary of this book ends. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope that you can pull these unconscious desires forward. I hope you can identify them, and I hope you can fulfill them and fully enjoy them and move on with your life and do something bigger and better in 2021. I hope that this was helpful. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any book recommendations that you would like me to review, leave that down in the comments below. If you've made it this far, leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.